Hello, I'm Reverend Dr. Horace F. Whitaker Jr., and thank you for joining us here at the Thoughts for Living podcast. Today, we hope that you will enjoy the content that we've worked hard to provide for you. Here's this week's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Thoughts for Living. We'd like to thank you for taking time to join us again at another podcast. We hope all is well with you and yours. As always, we'd like to remind you, for more information, please go to thoughtsforliving.com, and there you can find other resources for this podcast and previous episodes. Today, we'd like to talk about ecological consciousness theory. This is the framework that we developed in order to help us better understand how environment impacts our consciousness and how consciousness impacts our culture and how that impacts our worldview. And today we'd like to do a brief overview of ecological consciousness theory. We suggest that the first people who lived on planet Earth, our African ancestors, taught us to value the group, collaboration, spirituality, and personhood. And we also suggest that since the 17th century Enlightenment period, Eurocentric values have pervaded. And those values include valuing the individual, valuing competition, valuing idolatry, and valuing personal achievement at all costs. And we suggest, through ecological consciousness theory, that our current value system, Eurocentric value system, is not sustainable. So today we'd like to give a brief overview of ecological consciousness theory. Approximately 150,000 years ago, our ancestors, before leaving the African continent and populating the rest of the earth, developed values that have been passed down to us through generations. Their lived experiences provided the knowledge and understanding that led them to develop four fundamental values. These four basic values that help guide and help shape their worldview are valuing the group, collaboration, spirituality, and personhood. We call these Afrocentric values. Much later, during the 16th and 17th centuries, called the Enlightenment period, European males decided that they would develop values that expressed their worldview as they argued against the authority of the church and the authority of feudalism or monarchies or living under a king. Ecological consciousness theory suggests that the four main values, which are Eurocentric in nature, are individualism, competition, idolatry, and personal achievement at all costs. We suggest that these values are Eurocentric, developed by European males. Today, we'd like to talk about the development and the social impact of valuing the group versus valuing individualism. These would be the first two Afrocentric and Eurocentric values. Afrocentric, valuing the group. Eurocentric, valuing individualism. Now, when we talk about valuing the group, we have to return to the first people who walked on planet Earth. Those original groups of human beings who were Africans. Now, firstly, like most mammals, humans are social beings. We live initially in small groups or bands, some of which may have been groups of females with a male, as well as female and male bands of unrelated individuals. Attachments were formed and people were nurtured within the group, which helped provide stability and help keep the group together. Secondly, the group was also valued because it offered a sense of safety to its members. There was safety in numbers, and this safety kept them from being preyed upon by predators in their environment. Another reason that the group was important to our African ancestors was the group was able to share responsibility for their survival and share resources. Some members could look for a water source, while others looked for food. While some members left the camp to hunt or to forage, others could stay at the camp to make sure it remained secure and to perform other duties that was necessary. Unlike predators who would eat and sleep where they found food, our African ancestors brought the food back to the camp. So, if one was ill or injured, the group provided for their needs. These examples show how Africans learned the importance of the group, and that has been passed down to us even today. The fact that some group members could remain at home or in the camp while other members went out showed that they operated under a concept of egalitarianism, right? If you were ill or if you were hurt as an individual, that would put you in preeminent danger. Whereas if you were part of a group, being ill or being injured would not put you in danger because the group would still care for your needs. Now, we contrast this Afrocentric idea of the group valuing its members, being able to share responsibilities and share the resources, and also the fact that the group provided safety from predators. We contrast that with the Eurocentric idea of individualism. Now, individualism becomes a central idea during the Enlightenment period. Particularly, we're talking about the 17th century. But it begins during the age of genius, which is the early part of the 17th century. And so we're talking about the 1600s. A central figure of this age of genius period is Descartes. And Descartes coined the idea, I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am. Now, the scientists, the philosophers, the artists, those who publish books, and the wealthy elites all participated in creating and promoting their ideas of the rights of the individuals and to argue against the authority of the Catholic Church and against feudalism, which is basically living under the rule of a king. Now, during this period, freedom and rights were basically held by those who were born into privilege. If you were the son of a king, the son of one who was wealthy, then you automatically had freedom and privileges that the rest in that society or in that community did not share. But the thinkers, the scientists, and the artists at this time, Descartes and others, wanted to end that practice of rights and privileges and freedom only coming to those who had heritage that was either from the king or from wealth. They no longer wanted heredity, right? Who you were born to be the major reason why you had privileges and rights. But they wanted this freedom and these rights only for white males, not white women, and especially not blacks. They created ideas at this time without evidence that blacks were inferior to whites due to skin color. Also, they came up with ideas that blacks were inferior based on the shape of the nose or the shape of the head. They created ideas that Greek statues and Roman art were the best and the most beautiful. People at this time could not conceive of blacks being equal in beauty, culture, or intelligence. These untrue ideas were given authority by the scientists and the philosophers and the doctors, who not only repeated these false ideas, but published them in books. So others who could read accepted these ideas as facts. So schools, places of worship, and other institutions taught and retold these falsehoods over and over again until they became what's termed common knowledge, or what we would call common sense, that everyone believed was true. And things that we accept as common sense are things that go unquestioned. So these ideas about the inferiority of black people based on the shape of the nose or the shape of the head, the idea that in no way could black people be equal to Europeans when it came to beauty or culture or intelligence. These ideas were not only unquestioned, it was unconceivable. And so much so that these ideas became embedded, entrenched in European culture. This false narrative meant that blacks were not human beings, and white males represented the highest form of humanity, and as such, white was supreme. The Enlightenment, which brought individualism, gave birth to modern white supremacy in the late 1600s. And this is still present today. The idea of individualism, which came out of European males wanting, rightly so, to no longer live under the rule of a king or a monarch in a feudal system, and who wanted to do away with people only having rights and privileges based on who their parents were. If their parents were wealthy, if their parents were rulers, then you had rights and privileges. And we must say that was for males, because those same rights and privileges were never given to females. But the males were rebelling against this way of living that had pervaded European society for centuries. But their demands and ideas around individualism, freeing them from the control of the authority of the church, freeing them from control of monarchs, that idea they only held for themselves. That individualism was only directed toward white European males. The idea of individualism, the idea of freedom and rights and privileges were never put toward the lives of Africans nor the lives of women. And so we see in contrast clearly the Afrocentric idea of valuing the group, all of its members, because even in African culture, sometimes the women went out to hunt and the men stayed at the camp. And so you had a respect for both genders in the African valuing of the group. But in Eurocentric individualism, and still today, the rights and privileges that were given to men, those rights and privileges were never held for women. And of course, those rights and privileges were never held for blacks. We hope in the next episode to extend our overview of ecological consciousness theory by talking about the next two values from an Afrocentric perspective. That would be valuing collaboration. And from a Eurocentric perspective, that would be valuing competition. We really appreciate you taking time to join us in this podcast. And please, if you have any questions or comments, please go to thoughtsforliving.com and leave us your responses. We would love to hear from you. We thank you for your time and have a great rest of your week.
That was interesting. As you can see, we really provide a different way of viewing the world. And we feel that's very important in order that we might come up with different ways of making our world more sustainable for you and for me. We thank you for helping us in that regard and would love to hear your thoughts. So please feel free to reach out to us at thoughtsforliving.com. Thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your week.